So Brian Wong has agreed to come on today because Brian, as much as I think you're a fundamentalist type of guy when it
Yeah.
comes to stocks, you do enjoy and you spend a lot of time because the math is fun, right? You do like to
Mhm.
look at the technical, look at the chartists, see what they're doing, and you do, I think, employ some chart theory in how you'd make your own investments. Would I be right on all that?
It's good to have some level of timing. Like the technical analysis of when the buyers and sellers are in, it seems to have some play. Like it can be overruled by fundamental macro and other things, but I think it has benefit. Yeah.
Right. So what I've said all along is whether it's true or not, it's self-fulfilling.
Right.
Because if enough people are following the charts and making decisions based on the charts, then it's going to have an impact.
And also, I think there's some validity to it in terms of like balance of buyers and sellers. You're kind of like looking at a tug of war, and then you can see a movement, right? So it's not like, in the short term, like whatever the causes are, that can be disputed. But if you're looking at relative strength, that has some validity, I think. Yeah.
Right. So I'm bringing this all up today because the day was a day that the chartists or the technical experts have been so divergent on, in my view.
Yeah.
They've been anywhere from 410 to 415 as being the ceiling, the floor, the breakout point, whatever.
Mhm.
I've seen people with 410, 411, 414, and 415. I haven't seen
Mhm.
anybody with 413. I don't
Right.
know why.
Yeah.
But it's been all over that. I think
Yeah.
yours was 414.
Yeah.
Uh, but now we're past, at least as of now, this is 10:35 California time on Wednesday as we're doing this. And
Yep.
the last time I looked, the stock was around 419,
It was 420 last second I looked. Yes.
420. Okay, so we are past all of those.
Right.
And then I saw at least one person just a little while ago. I saw a headline saying 420 is another one of these points. So
Yeah.
help us out. Tell us where we are and what we might expect as we go into earnings and then even beyond.
So, um, intraday thing in the technical analysis do not count as much. We need to close the day over the 415, right? Because they talk about the candles, which is basically, where did it move during the day? So you want to close your candle above the thing. Otherwise, it may not count, right? And then sometimes you want to close the week above that thing. Otherwise, it may not count. So it can be called then a false breakout. We were over 422 2 days ago.
Right.
And then, things went to crap rapidly. So we got over the number.
Mhm.
So it's not like, okay, I'm over the number and it's good. I have to hold it
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
right? So we have to hold it through today for sure. And then really we want to hold it through Friday. And then we're kind of in the clear. Especially if you retest it, which basically means come back down to that number and it becomes the floor. Oh, we didn't go through.
So
The
380 right now would be that floor, is that we've closed around 380 a few times.
Right, and then we haven't gone back through it.
Right.
Although we went down through to 373, like you can look at some things and say, okay, we hit something and we didn't go down through it. So yeah, so 380, we have a lot of support at 360 to 380,
Okay.
and so then even if things went to crap, you shove down there, and then people think, okay, that's a deal. I couldn't get down below that. I'm not expecting to get down below that, and so I would buy.
All right. And I am more fun. I'm like 90% fundamentalist and 10% my own little technical analyst, which is
Mhm.
mostly the psychological points, which sometimes correspond to people who are putting up these technical points. But I'm not interested in the 5-year moving average and all that. I'm just interested in these kind of psychological pitch points, whether they're
Yeah.
tops or bottoms. So, so from a fundamentalist standpoint, we're sitting here going into earnings. There could be every reason in the world to think that people would be selling off prior to this earnings report
Mhm.
because they're worried that it's going to be a miss.
Mhm.
You could have just maybe as half as the people might be thinking it's going to be a beat. So you could have people that would be, I mean, buying into this earnings report because I think compared to like the last 2 or 3 years where I've been very focused on Tesla earnings reports, this one is probably less known. There's like less certainty around this one. What do you think?
Well, in terms of the numbers on EPS or growth, mainly looking at I think trying to get margins over 20%. Um, the the sales number, look pretty good on energy on cars. So we can get, reasonable financial numbers. But other than really having really bad numbers, like if we kind of come in a range, it will cause short-term and short-term movement. I mean, like if we come out with so the way timing works is they'll come out with the actual deck and the press release thing saying, okay, here's the numbers we're going to talk about in an hour,
Right.
right? Or 2 hours, right? When Elon and the team come on the call, right? So if they come up with the numbers and then we look at the numbers and then it's EPS over this, margin 20%, they'll put a general mood on the thing going in,
Right.
right? But it won't be huge movements barring something really horrible, and could be a nice little pop if it's like clearly over 20%, 22%, nice cash, all that kind of good stuff. But the movement has been less about that than about what's going to happen for the year in terms of FSD, in terms of the new car and all that kind of stuff. So that will, the movement of the stock will rapidly shift over to what is said in the call. How happy is the talk? How much flavor and indication do we get about the big thing, new cars, FSD, all that kind of stuff. So then the direction of the stock is, what is said in the call and the question of do we get good information from that?
Okay. And the old closing all-time high now is 480.
488. Oh, no, sorry. For the intraday was 48. I think for closing, I thought it was like 460. I'm thinking
I
460.
think no, I thought it was 480. You have
Could we closed that high? I didn't think we closed that high. I thought we like hit 48 and then,
let's
it
see. I've got
didn't.
it right here. The high for the 50. Hey, 488 was the 52-week high.
I know, but
480.
that was at the intraday. We didn't
Oh,
close that.
that is the interday. They show the interday there. That's right. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, closing. That would be possible to figure out also right here. Whoops, I'm not looking at the right place. Never mind. I'm taking up too much time here doing this. Let's see here.
All right.
480. Yeah. 479.
Okay. Okay. I didn't think we did that well. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the closing high. All right.
Yep.
So in order to break through that, news or momentum?
It can do it with a lot of momentum, like the overall market have to be ripping.
Yeah.
It would, we have, good, decent inflation news today, which helped the stock. So if the overall macro had a lot of really good news, and like everyone's loving everything that Trump's doing, blah blah blah, and the tech stocks are moving up, like say Nasdaq and S&P move up like 10%, right? You go from 5,800 to 5,200, something like that. Then you expect Tesla to move up like 20, 25% just by
Right.
more beta and all that kind of stuff. So a 25% move from here would be 420, so be like $100. It'd be you can get up to 520, right? So you can, if everything is wonderful everywhere else and just the bull market's just ripping, then nothing can happen to Tesla, and then we just get carried along with inflating PEs and everything.
Okay. All right. So if you like to prognosticate, you like to make bets. So do you think people will be at this point, because we're only now exactly 2 weeks to the earnings call, do you think people will be selling off in anticipation of a miss? Do you think people will be buying up in anticipation of a beat?
I'm um I'm thinking that it would be moving up slightly because we've already come down.
Yeah.
So right now it seems like we're turning and going back up again. So because we had an overall market high, we had a Tesla high a few weeks ago, and then people sold off on that. And now, inflation's better, other things look better. maybe the war in Israel, Gaza ending. So I think there's ways that it can, be positive, more bullish going forward, just a recovery of the stock over the next 2 weeks. So that could happen. It could also go sideways, but if you ask me what my bet is, my inclination is that we're um, recovering
Okay.
because there'll be in 5 days, uh, Trump then finds out, that and there'll be a bunch of things happen from that, which I think in general will be net positive.
Right. I would agree with you on that. So, Brian, the other reason I have you on here today is because about 7 days, and by the way, folks, I'm just going to really set you up on this one because we're not going to switch. We're going to be not to talk about Tesla. We're not going to be talking about the economy. We're not, although in a way it's about the economy, but we're not going to be talking about Tesla stock. We're going to be talking about something that Brian and I decided to just really go deep on, and that was the California fires. Yes, this does not probably affect you if you're in Tennessee or in Berlin or in China right now listening to the show. But it was a massive impact to California, the fifth largest economy in the world. It is a continuing impact because it's going to impact things like insurance rates and expectations for the future. We have a similar thing happening in Florida with hurricanes and the insurance rates and whatnot. And I just think that it was brought up on the All In podcast last week with regard to this massive impact on insurance rates. Brian and I'm going to say, Brian, I've spent about 50 hours in the last 7 days on this. I know you've spent a ton before the fires. You were already deep into this, and now you spent another bunch of time in the last 7 days doing some analysis.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, the issue though, why the fires were bad, why it happened, why it didn't get fixed, it didn't get mitigated more, and then technological solutions for how we should rebuild. Yes, we looked at that.
Right. So in the course of those 7 days, he and I have put all kinds of ideas into the pot. We've discussed it back and forth. We've done one video on it the other day. But now we've got kind of our final analysis, I'm a consultant, he's a consultant. I will be coming back to my client now, and I'm saying to my client, okay, here's my white paper. Here's what I think you ought to do. And I would say I'm very proud of what we've done.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm sorry, but I
Yeah.
think it's really first rate. And by the way, I've tested it with a fire marshal.
Mhm.
So I have a connection with a fire marshal. I put this in front of the fire marshal. He basically sent it back to me and said, I wouldn't change a thing. He wouldn't change a word. So we will go into this. This is both for consumers. This is for insurance companies. This is for city folks. This is for fire departments. This is for statewide. This is for federal. We're covering it on all different levels. And I think it's pretty obvious. I will encourage people to please give us as much commentary as possible on this because I think there's something pretty interesting here. A few things that other people have come up with, but also that Brian and I have uniquely come up with. I don't think you're going to find anywhere else. So, are we ready to go, Brian?
Ready?
All right. So, there's a premise here, there's an underlying premise. Or a couple of premises. Fire prone areas are clearly known. Both the fire departments and the insurance companies, at least, have them clearly marked. We know this because if you own a home and you're in one of these areas, you are going to be notified by your insurance company, oh, we're not going to cover you anymore, or we're going to raise your rates a ton, or you are designated and therefore you must do these things, or we are going to take away your insurance. So we know where they are. And it turns out there's dozens of actually inexpensive things that can be done to mitigate these fires that are not being done. And then these neighborhoods that are less prone to problems should likely take some of the same things we're going to be talking about here because there's still fires that get out of these fire zones, if you will, and get down into the valleys and rip through entire neighborhoods because vegetation, tree branches, in particular palm uh,
Bronze.
fronds, they end up being like little whirly gigs and they fly off and do tremendous damage. They just get caught up in the wind. So premise number one, Brian, any thoughts with regard to the fact that we know where we're talking about? We can identify it.
Yeah, so it's there's signs all over. We both live in California. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's always signs, big mini billboard things that say, color coded four colors, how much fire risk there is. So they're precisely knowing, for your area how much fire risk there is, and so that's a long-term thing that they know about, as well as the days before, like 5 days before this fire broke out, there was a red flag warning or other warnings about high winds and high fire risk. So it was, even for this one, there should have been preparation 5 days, like whatever, in general preparation of this, we need to handle this known ongoing problem. There's also, we need to have high alert. We need to mobilize 5 days before, which they didn't.
Right, which we'll get into some details on that in a minute. All right, so premise number two, a major contributor to runaway residential fires is the heat produced and the burning debris thrown off by each home. So every home becomes its own potential source of either continuing the fire, starting the fire, whatever. So every home is essentially liable in a way. If you are not doing everything you can to keep the fire from spreading, you are partially responsible for the next home on the block going up because of the debris in your yard, because one of your lawn chairs catches fire and goes through and hits the neighbor's house, because your car blows up and impacts the neighbor. So there's all these things that are relative to each individual's home being hardened as much as possible so that it doesn't damage other people's homes.
Right. And extreme version of this was seen during Hiroshima, where Japan had a lot of the paper wall homes, and they also have barbecue coal briquette things for cooking, which was a standard way of cooking. They didn't have electricity for or were using primarily electric oven, that kind of thing. So when the nuclear bomb hit, yes, the nuclear bomb set off the fire, but the city went into a firestorm because of a lot of paper, a lot of how their buildings were built, as well as having a lot of stuff inside. So the analysis by the U.S. engineers afterwards about like how much of this material can cause a really bad fire. You can just think of it by, if you're making your own fire, you can make a small fire, which is some logs, chopped wood, and I can make a really big inferno by stacking it up into something big and putting a bunch of other burnable material inside. I can make a bigger inferno. So from the small scale to the big scale, the principles are the same.
All right. So the number three, we have technology right now that didn't even exist a few years ago that should be a huge help in prevention, in preparation, and in protection. That's my three words: prevention, preparation, and protection. I'm sure somebody's used those before, but anyway, they came to my mind while I was creating this. So we have things like AI, Brian,
Yes, and satellites.
and satellites. So weather forecasting, I thought that was the first one. You mentioned it briefly just a second ago. I mean, 10, 20, 15 years ago, I did a blog about how poor the weather forecasting was, even in Southern California, which 85% of the days are sunshine and no clouds, and yet they couldn't even get the temperature right.
Mhm. Right.
I spent 30 days analyzing the forecast from 5 days before, 4 days before, 3 days before, and the forecast it changed every day. And by the time you got there, it was different. But man, the forecasting now is excellent. And to your point, they knew that these winds were coming 5 days in advance.
Right. And so, you need to use that knowledge because it's, it's not like an earthquake. Okay, it's like 10 seconds of warning,
Right.
right? Days and days.
Or even the hurricanes where you don't know where they're going to strike.
Right.
No, it's you are going to get it probably, and if you don't, you're just lucky. All right, so then we have satellite imagery now that can be used to spot fires fast. Now, I wrote this before I did the research. And I got lucky and I saw an article out of the blue that it was only 6 months old where this university down in Australia is just come up with some brand new technology where they're able to use a combination of imagery that actually identifies the smoke before it'll identify the fire.
Mhm.
But they have proven now that at least in July of this year, they had shown that they were able to do this in a symmetry, and they had
Simulation.
actual bit of symmetry. So,
Okay.
what do you think about that article?
Yeah, so I think there's probably even more of that kind of thing where you can um, look for things heating up. You can yeah, many things you can do to detect what's going to happen with the fires
Okay,
as they're forming.
and it would seem to me that if you know 5 days in advance, now you can focus a lot of satellite potential, a lot of satellites over your area, and begin looking for these
Going back to the insurance thing, I know friends who they got a satellite image picture from the insurance company when they canceled, saying, "Hey, you have an overhanging branch over your roof. We're canceling you." So, so in terms of like ultra detailed stuff, they go super detailed on it.
Okay, all right. And of course, you could have drones as well. You could have hundreds
Yeah,
of drones. And by the way, we need to define drones for the purpose of this. A drone is an autonomous vehicle of any kind. It can be submersible in water, it could be land, it can be aircraft. I know that the term drone now is commonly thought of as being an air-driven drone or an aircraft drone, and
mm,
a lot of what we'll be talking about will be those kinds, but there's certainly potential for ground-based drones as well. So we could have drones in the air that would have maybe even better chance of spotting these fires early. All you have to do is have a few of them over these fire-prone areas,
right.
and you have a much better chance of seeing one of these fires very, very early. So I would think that would
Mm.
be a huge way to solve things.
And then also it's the cost. It's not just that the drone can be positioned, because you could have a helicopter or a Cessna do the same thing. But because you wouldn't have to have a person inside flying it, just the same reason that Tesla Robotaxi will be cheaper, you can have a cheaper cost. So the plane, the Canadair CL415, that is the bigger thing that scoops up into a lake, which we have pictures of, which can drop like a couple of tons of water. I think like 1,700 gallons, which is about like 4 tons of water. Um, the the drones can be, instead of $40 million to do that, you could have, say, $12 million worth of like 30 or 40 drones that could then do more area but still have same mass, etc. So it's economically better, 4 times, 10 times better.
Then another piece of technology that we didn't have 3, 4, 5 years ago is the ability to communicate through Starlink. And this would allow all agents to always have communication before, during, in the worst situation, we know that Elon was down there during this fire and over the last few days, bringing Starlink through using Cybertrucks to get them there, bringing Starlinks to these communication centers to provide more capabilities to the fire people.
Yeah. So, and you should be integrating all this, like sensor mesh of information and with the communication mesh into real time. And then, as you talked about, predictive, anticipating the stuff. So we shouldn't be looking at data that's like a day old of like what happened here. Oh, now that's now in flames. The maps, the fighting, the mitigation should be based on here's what's happening by the second. Here's how we project it has to happen based on winds and stuff like that to simulate ahead. So, far better information to proactively and then reactively do something.
And something we're going to spend a lot of time on in a second is the building and ground hardening. So buildings and vegetation hardening techniques that should reduce losses basically to zero. And I think this was our most important finding. This is
Mhm.
like incredible. I had no idea. I don't know if you had an idea, but it is basically Zero. I mean, we
Yeah.
have examples of buildings from this last fire, we'll talk about in a minute, that are still standing because they've used some of these hardening techniques.
It's something that I've looked at, because of my analysis of how do you make nuclear bomb resistant cities. So you can do that with um, ultra hard cement. You can do that, with other construction techniques that are less extreme. Although I think that if the costs are not that different from using the really best materials versus pretty good materials. So if you want to have California resistant to earthquakes, fires, hurricanes, and also be more resistant to nuclear bombs, like better than a Minuteman silo, then we can do that and make that an affordable cost where basically buildings just don't get damaged.
Yeah. All right. So let's start though with early warning. So I think this is also an important part of what we learned is that, we have early warning systems for atomic war. We have early warning systems for tsunamis. We're trying to develop early warning systems for earthquakes, even though it's barely going to help. We have early warning systems for hurricanes, even though, again, you don't know where it's going to land or who's going to be most impacted, but at least it gets people to be able to evacuate. But we really don't have an early warning system for these fires, even as much as we have what we call the red flag alerts and whatnot, but it's not like designed to help people make decisions about what to do. So here is our theory. All right. So first, weather forecasters should send out various levels of alerts to all concerned: news media, fire departments, city and county agencies, block captains, which we'll talk about in a minute, and residences directly. So every single resident in a fire zone should be their email and their text or whatever, some combination, their WhatsApp number, whatever, any kind of way that they can be communicated with should be in a database. And as soon as we have the various levels of alerts, these should go out to every single resident. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, and that the plans and the preparations need to be made so that appropriate actions are taken. Um,
The
like
alert
if
could
we,
include that. The alerts could include that, even though they should know in advance, but the alert could say, okay, this is a level one alert. Here's what you need to do.
and the other thing would be that if you don't rebuild every house to whatever particular standard, if you have schools, hospitals, community centers that are built to the higher standard, you know, bomb-proof shelters, fireproof, etc. Like a cement dome that is, looks nice but is also completely fire resistant. Then you can say, okay, we need to move um, disabled people, people who can't do whatever, to those places, based on a level one to level two alert. When no, something's going to happen. Because there was an unfortunate person who was like a paraplegic or someone who died in these fires, an ex um, someone with a child star on TV, because his mother, who has a broken arm, couldn't move him. And then she left to try and get help, come back a few minutes later, and the fire destroyed the building. So if elderly people, disabled people, will have time to move, then they need to move, when you would have at least an hour or two to do something.
Right. So I've come up with some level one, level two alert type things. I'm sure that fire specialists could do a much better job of designing this than I did, but it's just kind of an idea, a starting place. So I'm saying that level one might require extra lawn watering, bringing in the lawn furniture into the house or any other such object that could be a potential um, uh, fire,
Hazard,
something, what?
hazard.
A hazard, something that could catch fire and then cause the house to burn or somebody's neighbor's house to burn. Also, checking on planned evacuation housing, calling up in advance and making sure that I have someplace that I can go. I know that Nicholas Gibbs, when his house was hit by the hurricane, and he was leaving his house and he went to evacuate to somebody else's house. Well, they were also being evacuated. So his evacuation plan was busted. So on these fire zones things, you want to know where am I going? I don't want to just leave and end up in some center, someplace sleeping on a gym floor. Where are you going to go? And so the level one alert would be part of that.
The other thing is that when I had a fire near my house, it was like about 150, 200 feet away. It was below a slope. What happened was a pigeon coop blew up. So someone who was raising pigeons and it blew up, caused a fire. So when that occurred, I could see the smoke, rising up quite a ways from that. So they turned out like 7 or 8 fire trucks. So 4 were on my level because they were coming up from this side, and then the 4 were down below. And then when we were to try to evacuate, we were blocked off. There was all
Mhm.
these fire trucks there, and I couldn't move. So then, if I was to evacuate because something had happened, I would have to start walking because the vehicle would not be able to do it. Similarly, in a mass situation like LA has traffic jams all the time,
Right.
right? And, like late at night, all that kind of stuff. And if you actually had an emergency where, you had to evacuate 100,000 people, roads would get clogged in a super duper hurry. So you need to have more time to do stuff in places where you wouldn't have, you have traffic issues.
Right. And that kind of gets us to the level two, might require making sure that all cars that are not necessary for evacuation are either garaged or removed from the fire zone so that evacuating vehicles are not having problems getting past these vehicles, that they're not blowing up in your front yard and causing more damage. We saw in this particular fire, we saw bulldozers coming in and having to move vehicles out of the way. So some kind of a plan with regard to vehicles that are not going to be used in your actual evacuation. And
Yeah.
that would be maybe level two.
Yeah. So you need to have these alerts many hours in advance because, just doing stuff in the last hour, you don't have enough time. You need to have more time to do stuff.
And then part of that level two evacuation would also be packing up your one or two vehicles, however many you need in order to evacuate, that you're going to
Yeah.
be using in the evacuation. You'd have them packed, ready to go in case you get to level three.
hmm
So level three might be turning on roof sprinklers. We'll talk about roof sprinklers in a minute.
Yeah.
Closing any fire barriers. We'll talk about those in a minute. And then making sure if there's any issues of vents or other things that need to be dealt with. And then, of course, evacuating. So that would be your level three. All
Yeah.
right. Okay, one thing that would be eliminated by this system is the brave dads standing on the roofs with a garden hose,
Right.
trying to keep his house from burning to the ground with this little pea shooter.
Yeah.
People in this case, if they just do these things, even without the hardening, which we'll talk about in a minute, they could leave their homes with a fair degree of confidence that they've done all that they could do to solve existing issues that we know about.
Right. Um, some jurisdictions have, if you do an addition to your home, you have to put internal sprinklers into it. But that's only addressing the inside of the home.
Right.
So if you want to do more for the larger community, then you need to have a stepped up level. So if you already have this one thing but it's insufficient, you just need to spend a bit more to get to the proper protection.
And then one of the reasons why people would have more confidence is if 100% of their neighbors are doing the same thing, then that means the other neighborhood houses and the stuff outside the homes, et cetera, are not going to cause damage to my home. So just
Right.
the community all working together, and we'll talk again about captains in a minute.
Mhm.
So let's talk about home hardening. That was, I think, for you and me, because you're a scientist and I'm a wannabe.
Hmm.
This was really, really fascinating stuff. So, as I just mentioned, as was proven in the Palisades fire, multiple hardened homes survived. So we do know what works. And since we
Yeah.
know what works, it seems dumb,
Mhm.
at least not to do the things that are relatively inexpensive. So you started a minute ago talking about fireproof materials.
Mhm.
This isn't even hard.
Yeah.
Stucco is fine. Stone is fine. Brick is fine. specially treated woods are excellent. So the kind of things in terms of the major thing that you're using to build the home, it's kind of what we use anyway. Oops, I've lost your sound. I've lost your sound. I've lost your sound. There we
How
go.
about now?
You're back. You're
That
back.
work? Okay. I must have bumped the button. Yeah. So I've been looking, of course, at um, the more extreme end, but yeah. So if you have if you improve the overall conditions, like I said, if you have really bad where it's like super flammable, you have a Hiroshima city, then it goes up in super
Right.
firestorm. If you have something that's more resistant, more spread out, then things are better. And then if you improve these building by building things, we have codes, then you would drastically reduce the overall risk. You could drop it down by 10 to 100 times, like you're talking about.
Right. And so since most houses are already built with these materials anyway, and the few remaining that aren't, apparently from my reading, you can use coatings to get up to 1 hour of fire resistance. And so you can, and that's what we'll be talking about with this other part too. Let me combine it. Eaves, overhangs, balconies, decks, and patios are a serious problem, more
Mhm.
serious than the house building materials themselves, because commonly the eaves, overhangs, balconies, decks, and patios are made out of wood.
Mhm.
But these can be treated. These can be coated, and I guess there's treatments as well as coatings. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, yeah. So you either you soak the whole two by four in some coating material, or you just paint over it. Yeah, different kinds
Okay.
of ways to do it.
Yeah. And so you can get up to 1 hour or more protection.
Right.
Then when it comes to roofing, most people now have, of course, gotten rid of their wood shake roofs. And my understanding, ceramics, composites are all supposed to be fine, but by
Mhm.
far the best is steel roofs. I actually, on one of my rentals, I do have a steel roof. They are the best. But yeah, go ahead.
Best relative to current more ordinary roof type construction. But if you do a cement dome,
Right,
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 and people have made residences, of that kind, right, then basically the entire thing, especially if you use hardened cement, which they made the Freedom Tower, the replacement for the World Trade Center, out of ultra hard cement, right? Then you can go, you know, 10 times or 20 times more, 100 times more, where basically it's super hard. And there are places in the world where they use a lot of cement for construction
right. And in fact,
of residential houses. Yeah.
yes, it's becoming more and more popular because you can also 3D print with cement. And so
Yeah.
that's becoming a very popular way to build homes, especially, I guess, in Texas for some reason.
Mhm.
Number four, tempered triple pane windows is
Mhm.
what you should be using.
Mhm.
So if they're tempered and triple pane, because I guess it turns out that one of the biggest problems is you get inversions inside the house because of the weather that's being set up by the fire itself, and you also get the windows breaking because of the heat. You get the windows breaking because of things running, bouncing into them, tree limbs and whatnot. So tempered triple pane windows are excellent and probably should be required. The fire department or the insurance company should probably be requiring these. But it's even better if you put those steel security curtains, which will also help against theft and terrorists.
Right, right. And like I said, I was relatively recently had that issue where a neighbor's house, the chicken coop behind it. So the house was fine, but the chicken coop behind, pigeon coop blew up, and then that fire to three backyards. When that initial thing blew up, which was just um, whatever um, bird poop and maybe a small gas, maybe a propane tank or something like that. When that thing blew up, um, I was like 200 feet away, 30, 40 feet up a hill from it. But my sliding doors hit like it was, I thought, what is that, an earthquake or something like that? It just like the air pressure hit that thing from a relatively small explosion. So you got a car blowing up other things, easily blow out neighbors' windows and that kind of thing. So, um, so in a really big fire, your windows and your sliding doors can really go unless you have them hardened. And then if you have them hardened, then your overall air conditioning, heating, and cooling your home will be
Yes.
far better.
Right.
Go from like double pane, whatever, to triple and stuff like that. You'll be able to save energy when there's no emergency happening to pay for it.
And you can well imagine that if your windows blow out, then that makes it so much easier for burning debris to get into your home. And now it burns from the inside out. It doesn't matter what you've done to secure the materials.
Right.
Okay, here's one of our big finds. This is a big find. We're not the only ones that found it. It's been talked about on a few television stations and whatnot. A sprinkler system on the roof using just the same kind of sprinkler equipment that you use for your front yard, uh, hooked up to your pool or to a reserve tank. If you don't have a pool, I highly recommend you put a tank in the ground. It wouldn't even have to be as big as a septic tank. It could be like maybe 100 gallons would probably be plenty, although 1,000 gallons would be better. Anyway, you can do it with a sump pump, a powerful sump pump, and hook that up to a sprinkler system on your roof and turn that baby on. And those are the houses that didn't burn in the Palisades.
Right. And it's just like everyone choosing to have a water heater, a tank, which is, a bit of infrastructure so you have hot water. Here you just have a reserve of water, which is just like choosing to have indoor plumbing. Like 100 years ago, we, have everyone with outhouses and stuff like that. They don't have indoor plumbing. By choosing to do that, things are safer and better, more comfortable.
Yeah, and when I was talking to the fire marshal, he was talking about having a 1.5 inch hose as well. So if you have a 1.5 inch hose before you leave the building, when you get the level 3 alert, you can rapidly soak your any kind of decks and balconies and things like that, plus any of your vegetation. But the 1.5 inch hose is like a fireman's hose, as opposed to your little hose for your backyard. And so this will be, again, a very inexpensive way to really create a lot of hardening as you're leaving.
The other thing is you can put in some intelligence to it. We have AI, we have satellites, other things. You could have something where it would have more intelligent control, not just I'm just dumping all the water here. It could spray it to some other area based upon, valid instructions from city fire control to say, okay, dump the water that way because it would be better.
All right, then we have the vegetation. The vegetation rules are well known. Mainly, it requires people to only have these fire resistant plants within the first 5 feet of the home. It seems like a very small thing to ask to
Mhm.
have the first 5 feet. Find out some cactus or some succulents or some things that are very fire resistant that go within that first 5 feet. And then after that, you can have whatever you want. I mean, I guess it would be better if your whole yard was succulents, and it would be better for a lot of different reasons. Mine certainly is not, but these are the first 5 feet is what people are asking for. It seems like that should be an easy one.
Yep, and there's all kinds of zoning requirements already here. Yeah.
Block captains. Okay, here's one of my favorites because I invented it,
Hmm.
but it's not that special because we've already had, for years, we've had the neighborhood watch. That's been going on. I don't know, as long as as long as I've been an adult, I think. So we could be talking, 55 years that we've had neighborhood watch. But instead, holy cow, how much better, how much more important would it be in a fire zone to have one person for every 20 houses or whatever, however you want to set it up, who is responsible for making sure all these things are being done. Uh,
Hmm.
so I've broken it down into 3 parts. Number one, quarterly inspections. Once per quarter, this person would be trained. They would go, this is not a paid person, this is a volunteer, but they would be trained. And once per quarter, they would go in and visit each home. Not a big deal. 10-minute discussion with everybody, have everybody in the household there so they can have a quick discussion about evacuation routes, blah, 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 all the latest stuff that's being tried. And then, what to do in a level 1, level 2, level 3. And then what are you doing? Do you have your sprinkler? Is your sprinkler working? Go out and make sure. Here, throw the sump pump in the pool, hit the on switch. Do you get sprinkling on your roof? Very simple. I don't know what all would be involved. The fire specialist would be much better at making this plan than me, but that to me would be once a quarter, this fire assistant for the neighborhood would go around and do that.
It seems to me that in terms of the compensation and compliance, it would be better to integrate that in with insurance, because if you're in compliance, then you reduce the risk. So your insurance rate should be lower. Like everyone should have lower insurance
Right.
rates based upon that, and they would be coordinating that information with the insurance companies or with state, local, or federal, whoever's handling a broader insurance. So I think there's ways where the actual value benefit is shared to and to provide extra motivation for it.
Okay. Then number two, as soon as we have a level 1, level 2, or level 3 alert, the block captains make sure inspections for the preventative methods are in place. They go around and make sure if there's a home that's unoccupied so that they didn't get the alert, that they make sure that that home is taken care of. They make contact with those occupants that may not be there. They would have a list of all the ways to get in touch. So this would be like at the level 1, level 2. They're making sure that things are happening as they should in those kind of alerts.
Yeah, probably needs to, coordinate with a general civil defense kind of operation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's been done how many times before? This shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
Then businesses in the area should have their own sets and ways to respond to this kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the city planning department, whoever it is, businesses should also be coordinated in some way to go through these exact same processes in terms of evacuating their employees, in terms of sprinkler systems, et cetera. Because, I mean, I've owned a few warehouses, and believe me, I know about sprinkler systems, and I know that I'm required to have them, and it's mostly just to save my own goods. It's not
Right.
even really to save the neighborhood. So, I mean, it's not a big deal to be doing this kind of stuff. It's already being done. And as to your point, it was the insurance company that came in and would tell me, yes, you have to have this here, and yes, you have to have that there. It wasn't even the fire department, it was the insurance company.
Right. And then in these LA fires, um, the person who lost to the current LA mayor, a business person, went and sent a wire truck and other things to save a shopping mall, the Palisades Mall, the one that didn't get burned down, from having actions related to that.
Yes, yes. And of course, there is a little trend right now to private fire departments as well, to hire a private fire department to be responsible for taking care of your house. Okay, then we have a big issue, which I saw some pictures yesterday where there were somebody showing their yard, all of their property was looking great, but they were abutting to a government property, to a federal or to a state property that was horrible. It was all tons of brush and et cetera. So I'm saying let's make individuals responsible. If you make what individuals responsible specifically to set things, they tend to have a better result. So maybe there needs to be individuals within fire departments, within federal, lands management or whatever. You are responsible to maintain this piece of dirt.
Mhm.
Okay. Now that doesn't mean you have to be out there with your own lawnmower. It just means you are responsible to make sure that in fire season, which we only have 6 months of 5 months of fire season, it's basically September to February, March. You better make sure that this thing is tended.
Mhm.
All right. Then right. Last line of protection is always a well-equipped firefighting service. So where we got started actually on this whole thing, Brian, it was so funny. I put up a picture on X of drones, hundreds of them, coming into the Palisades with with water coming out of their out of their bellies.
Yeah.
And people who looked at that, some of them thought that they were little little drones that would have only been able to carry a glass full of water.
Yeah.
No, they were intended to be big drones with a lot
Right.
of water. But
Yeah.
anyway, it created quite let's say that it went viral.
Yeah.
But that's where we kind of started, and we started looking at equipment. We started looking at what is possible. And I hadn't even discussed this with you, Brian. I found out that they do have 10,000-gallon tanks
Hmm.
and they're manned or unmanned. These are already existing in the Los Angeles County Fire Department, that they send these tanks into these fire zones to supplement what's coming out of the hydrants and
Hmm.
what's coming out of the trucks, because the trucks typically only carry about 1,000 gallons. So these 10,000-gallon tanks are something
Hmm.
that you can use in this situation. So it occurred to me that would be one thing that they might want to have a lot more of.
Hmm. Right.
So anyway, my premise here is that this is a regional problem.
Hmm.
Stretches all the way from Canada, Western Canada, all the way down to some of Mexico. And it's all the 11 Western states that are all involved in Texas. That's not one of the 11 Western, but Texas is also included. They also have a lot of these fires. So since it's a regional and international problem, I'm suggesting that there be a regional response in terms of equipment.
Hmm.
So the U.S. federal government, Canada, Mexico, all three governments putting in some money, putting in some of the energy, some of the direction, all of the states and the provinces and what are they in Mexico? They're states also, right? Anyway, pulling together all of the affected individuals in this region,
Hmm.
and then pre-staging massively overwhelming fire prevention or fire suppression capability. What do you think?
Well, we already have the National Guard, and the equipment they have is, like old tanks and that kind of stuff, like tanks being, shooting projectiles. But they called out for these kind of situations anyway. So if if the greater risk is not, you know, land invasion from a foreign power, but fires, large fires, then their equipment should be reflective of that. 60% military equipment, 40% fire emergency equipment. So you should be properly equipping them for the situations that they're more likely to be called up for.
Yeah, and I mean, there's tons of amazing equipment already. We've shown some pictures of some things that were being invented, which includes like a half track that has an ability to supercool itself using the water that it's carrying. It can supercool itself and go autonomously into a fire, and then be actually autonomously putting water on the flames. We've seen great airplanes, great potential drones, possibly carrying up to 1,750 pounds. When I say drones, again, the kind of helicopter type drones. And then we came up with an idea using there's an issue with water. Okay, there's an issue with having enough water, and this is true for all of Southern California. And I thought, well, gee whiz. Have you ever gone across one of those rivers, Brian, during the rainy season?
I've gone whitewater rafting. I've gone across bridges.
This is the different. This is the LA rivers. Okay. And one of them is called the LA River. And I can't even remember the name of all of them, but there's about 5 or 6 of these rivers that the runoff well, first of all, just the runoff from the streets, but then the snow runoff from the mountains
Mhm.
comes down and fills these rivers to the brim, and they're all concrete rivers.
Okay.
And when I say fills them to the brim, I mean, and they're going 50 miles an hour. People die, dogs die. I mean, get trapped in these things. It's really quite amazing to watch. Billions of gallons are going
Mhm.
into the ocean. And so people have talked about forever, how do we capture that runoff and put it into some kind of reservoirs? Well, we've got this guy, Elon Musk, and he's got this company called the Boring Company.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that, gee whiz, why couldn't that runoff go into boring tunnels,
Hmm.
then be kept underground where it's not going to evaporate? And it would, it would be so fast, so easy to just grab some of that water coming down. And it would be inexpensive because the boring company builds these tunnels so inexpensively. So it would not be expensive to create these underground reservoirs. Now you've got it sitting there ready to go. These various aircraft can use a massive hose that they put down into the lakes or whatever, but this would be into this underground reservoir and just suck it right up into the tanks and away they go. What do you think?
So there has 10 years ago, um, in a proposition, the state and city of LA, state of California, had approved building 10 reservoirs, and they allocated several billion dollars to this, but nothing had been built. So there's an issue of having getting rid of the regulations and the lawsuits that are preventing things from being built. So so all the things that have been approved, have been funded, need to get built, and then they also then need to allocate some other funds to do what you're suggesting.
So think about how much easier the permitting would be if it was underground, because it could use underground situations where the federal, state, or local government owns the above ground, and now
Yeah.
you're putting the reservoir underground. Kaboom, you're done.
Yeah, it could be easier because of no animals or plants or other things that need to be affected versus
Snails
an
and
above ground.
snails and worms.
Right.
There might be some
Right.
protected worms.
Yeah.
So, okay, I got a list now of three obvious things.
Mhm.
Number one, underground, all utilities, all power lines need to go underground. No excuses, immediate action. My dad, his entire career was building epoxy, epoxy encapsulated transformers, the large transformers that go up on your line. And the reason why they were making epoxy encapsulated transformers was to put them underground and to
Mhm.
put the power underground. So he started that in the 50s. So putting power lines underground is not something new. But the last time they had this big push to put them underground, same problem. Permitting problems, animals being disturbed, whatever. No more excuses. High, at least in these areas as a beginning place, any high risk fire area should not have a single exposed power problem.
Yeah, where I live, they've would have multiple power outages a year because wind got to 30 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour, something like that, because of the fact that these power lines are exposed and there's issues with it. Fortunately, I haven't lost power because I have the solar and power walls, but
Yeah.
it is something that has been a problem for decades and needs to be fixed.
So the incoming president of the United States got laughed at a few weeks ago for suggesting that we need to sweep our forests. But it turns out that countries and nations and tribes have been sweeping their forests for millennia. Larry Goldberg was on my program the other day talking about in South Africa, they absolutely went out and swept their forests. We know that this happens in Germany. We know it happens in some states. Forest management needs to take place. There are ways to do it right and ways to do it wrong. We need to fix it.
And Florida, with about half of the close to, over half of the forests that California has, does it far better. They just do more controlled burns, like 2 million acres of controlled burned, versus you have 2 million acres of wildfire, 2 million acres of controlled burn. So either it's going to burn either uncontrolled or controlled. So
Right.
take your pick, and then um, getting rid of the brush is again known for 100 years. I've looked at all those like forest management things. Everyone knows what you have to do.
Yeah, I don't think this is not brain science. This
Yeah.
is something that we can look to the ages and find the right way to do it. When number three was water management, Brian, we already talked about that. I didn't mention one of the other things would be to use gray water. And also that Elon Musk now says that desalination can be done as inexpensively as regular water. So Elon, if you got a minute, uh, could you please tell some people how to set up a desalinization plant. Maybe we can set up a trial one, prove it out. And then if that's true, I think it would be phenomenal.
Again, those things already exist. Like there's very large desalination plants in Israel, really low cost. It's just a matter of getting the right scale, like a gigafactory of water. It can be done.
Okay. All right. Well, Brian, I think we've come to the end. I'm going to encourage the people that have stayed to the end. I want to encourage them once again to go ahead and check out your concerns, your thoughts, your responses. Down below, give us as much as you possibly can. We'd like to keep this conversation going. We are going to try to get this idea published, see if we can find people to pick it up, because I don't see anybody else putting together this kind of a comprehensive analysis and plan. Any last thoughts, Brian?
Just a little reward for the Tesla folk who are staying on. The stock went up over $3 while we were talking, almost 1% to just shy of 424. So
24. We've broken through 420 if we can hold it for an hour and a half.
yes, that's right.
All right. By the time you're watching this, you probably already know the answer.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Brian. It has been great, as always, having you on. And this will be showing both on Brian's Next Big Future channel as well as my channel. And who knows where else. We might try to find other places to put it as well. All right. So for all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.